Hi, good afternoon to all of you. Good afternoon. So, shall we start? Thank you. So, let's start. Yesterday, we were discussing about the reorganization of states. We had discussed about the reorganization of major states. Till contemporary times, we had discussed about states like northeastern states that were bifurcated from the state of Assam, clear? And also we had discussed about creation of Telangana in 2014 based on socio-economic and regional characteristics or parameters. Today we'll discuss about one another state which has recently been reorganized, clear? After abrogating Article 370 of Indian Constitution in form of Jammu and Kashmir and Ladakh, clear? We'll discuss about this state as well, which is the latest configuration in the political map of India, clear? First of all, before we start, clear? One question was raised lastly. I think you raised some question yesterday. Frontier and boundary, clear? I could not answer because of paucity of time, clear? So his question is, what is the difference between a frontier and boundary? Being students of geography, clear? It's very important for all of you to know. In fact, many of you must be knowing also, clear? Any idea what is the difference between the terms boundary and frontier, clear? So we have two terms that we use normally and that too indiscriminately. One is boundary, another term is frontier. Any one of you? Actual length. Line between the two countries. And what do you mean by frontier then? Demarcating. And frontier? Adjoining areas, you meant to say? See, first of all, I'll let you know. Being students of geography, it should be very clear, clear? Boundary is a pure political concept. And frontier is a pure geographical concept. Clear? Just make it clear because that will help you in optional also. Clear? Boundary is a pure political concept whereby it is basically a linear line to demarcate the areas of two countries. Clear? That is known as boundary. Clear? At the same time, the areas which are not clearly defined, and even if it is defined, the areas aside the boundaries, this area is a large area that may be termed as frontier. Clear? Some countries are divided by boundaries. For instance, I'll let you know. The biggest example being Korean Peninsula. North and South Korea divided along the boundary known as 38th parallel. Clear? USA and Canada separated by boundary known as 49th parallel. Clear? But at the same time, if you look into boundary between India and Nepal, it's not a boundary. It's an area altogether, which is known as the Himalayan Terai. Clear? So it's a Himalayan frontier. So frontier is not a lateral line. It's basically an area that demarcates two political entities. Clear? So it's basically marked by geographical phenomena. Political boundary is basically a man-made phenomena. Lateral line being drawn. Radcliffe line between India and Pakistan is a boundary. Clear? But if you look into Sir Creek is not a boundary. It's a frontier. I'll give you many examples like that. Sir Creek is not a boundary. It's a frontier. Why? Because it's basically a cut area, rather a tidal estuary, and on the one side we demand more areas towards India, that is Gujarat, and more areas Pakistan demand from the region of Sindh. It's not a boundary, linear line. It's basically a geographical phenomenon to be termed as frontier. Clear? So these are frontiers. So frontiers are geographical concept, boundaries are political concept. Clear? Boundaries are man-made, frontiers are basically phenomena marked by topography. Clear? So these are different. So 38th parallel, 49th parallel, Radcliffe line. The biggest example he asked in the first class, I'll let you know. Clear? Line of control is a boundary, bilateral boundary. Line of actual control, it's basically, I'll let you know, even though line is drawn, but there's a no man's land in between. Clear? It can also be termed as block or frontier also. But technically we call it as line of actual control to restrain on both the sides. Clear? So political boundaries are purely political and man-made. Frontiers are geographical boundaries, large areas. This difference needs to be understood. Clear? Okay, coastal boundaries are not boundaries. Largely a zone. Frontier is always a geographical zone. Clear? Not created by man. It's basically a geographical phenomenon. Himalayan region, Himalayas divide India and Nepal. That is not a boundary. We cannot draw a boundary. It's basically a frontier region. That is why large number of people from Madheshis community in Nepal, they come to India easily because we have got porous boundary. Why porous boundary? It's not a man-made line, lateral line. It is basically an area whereby people can move to and fro. So people from India and Nepal, they have got a very porous boundary. Why porous? It's not a boundary. In fact, it's basically a zone. It's basically a frontier. Clear? So this is no lateral line. Large areas that divide the two political entities are normally termed as frontiers. Political boundaries being purely man-made. Clear? Frontiers may not be man-made. Clear? So these are important concepts. Yeah. No, it cannot be beyond the boundary. Yeah, for a country, it has to be in the hinterland. The term is hinterland. It has to be in the hinterland. It cannot go beyond the boundary. Clear? So these are basically very important concepts, especially in political geography. Clear? So boundary and frontier. Clear? Now coming to clear the reorganization of Jammu and Kashmir. Clear? It was asked last time. Again, I'll let you know. Not much development, but we need to understand. Clear? The important thing is that in the year 2019, the Union Parliament, comprising of both the Lok Sabha and the Raj Sabha, they passed a bill whereby the Article 370 pertaining to the special status to Jammu and Kashmir was abolished. Even though it remains in the constitution, but it has proved to be inoperative from 31st of October 2019. And after abolishing Article 370 or making it inoperative from 31st of October, Government of India has decided to give a new status to Jammu and Kashmir, and this status is of two union territories simultaneously. One union territory comprising of Jammu and Kashmir on the one hand, another union territory comprising of Ladakh on the other hand. Clear? This configuration was done basically to promote huge investments from different parts of India, because under special provisions to Indian Constitution, outsiders could not purchase land in Jammu and Kashmir earlier. They could not participate in all economic activities in Jammu and Kashmir. To make it properly integrated with Indian Union, this change was brought about so that other people or Government of India can play a proactive role to develop Jammu and Kashmir and Ladakh together. So it has been declared to be a union territory. So two new union territories has been added. On the one hand, we have Jammu and Kashmir, another being Ladakh. In fact, at this time, Ladakh is much larger than Jammu and Kashmir, also very large area, beyond which we have the region of Aksai Chin and Siachen Glacier also. And beyond Siachen Glacier, there are Chinese territory which has been given by Pakistan. Clear? Very sensitive. And rest of the part is Pakistan occupied Kashmir, or termed as the region of Azad Kashmir. Clear? So within this we have bifurcated this, but it cannot be termed as proper reorganization of states. It's basically the concept of creating two union territories in the sensitive region of Jammu and Kashmir. Reorganization of states lastly is only the creation of Telangana in 2014. Clear? Now, since we are discussing this, how many of you know about the line of control? What do you know about line of control? What is the concept of line of, when it came into being? When it came into being, line of control, what was this line known earlier? What is the status of this line in global community, among global leaders, community? What do you know about this? This is a very sensitive issue for India. Bilateral line, internationally not recognized, true. Is effectively under Pakistan's control. Clear. Why I'm asking this? The reason is you need to know that in 1972, ceasefire line that existed since 1948 was only renamed as line of control under Shimla Agreement, which was concluded by Indira Gandhi on the one hand, and on the other hand, Zulfikar Ali Bhutto. Clear? This resulted into line of control in 1972. And at the same time, this line of control, because it was decided to restrain firing and cross-border firing across the line, even though it is not maintained, or sanctity has not been maintained by Pakistan largely. Therefore, we have to respond also. And it's a face-to-face encounter that takes place between India and Pakistan. Line of control. Clear? It's a bilateral line, not an internationally recognized boundary. Clear? Unlike the line that separates India and Pakistan in Punjab and Rajasthan. Clear? Three sections we had discussed: Indo-Pak border. One is line of control in Kashmir, Indo-Pak border in the region between Rajasthan and Gujarat, and at the Rajasthan and Punjab and in Gujarat, the line being known as the Sar Creek. It is not a line. In fact, it is a frontier, tidal estuary. Clear? There's a division of line. Median line is not drawn. India wants more land. Pakistan wants more land. Clear? This was the latest configuration that was done within the political map of India. So do write briefly about creation of two union territories. You want to ask something? You want to ask something? Please. Earlier?
There was a Johnson line.
Johnson line, yeah. Again, I'll let you. The reason why? Because it's Johnson line, the concept came later. The first concept was that China did not respect the McMahon line that was drawn much earlier in 1914. China still does not accept the McMahon line because China believes it is an imperial line. When it was drawn, China was not a nation also. Clear? China became a full-fledged nation in 1949. Clear? Therefore, since China does not respect the McMahon line itself, that's because of this in Sino-Indian War, they entered into the region of Ladakh and acquired Aksai Chin region. Clear? When it acquired Aksai Chin region, then at the same time, clear, Johnson line was there on the top. Clear? China refused to accept this Johnson line also. Clear? And thereafter, Pakistan agreed to surrender that corner area beyond Siachen Glacier to China. China acquired that area also because initially McMahon line was the earlier agreement, Johnson line later on. But since McMahon line itself was not respected, there was no point of going for Johnson line. No, why India did not retaliate? The reason is not because of Chinese aggression. India did not retaliate. You must know this thing, clear? Because even now, every day I'm talking about, per day, there is an investment of crores of rupees to maintain military force in Siachen Glacier. And that region is even beyond Siachen Glacier. India realized it will be a big burden on treasury to maintain that region. That is why India also did not retaliate strongly. India could have retaliated. But what was the point of having that region? Even Siachen Glacier, clear? What is the point of having Siachen Glacier? It is unproductive, inhabitable region which requires only one-sided investment. Clear? Right now, that is why China has entered into hard bargain with India. China says that Aksai Chin can be given to India, but not the region of Tawang in Arunachal Pradesh. Why? Because on the river, geography students, you must be knowing that there's a river that originates from Tibet known as Sangpo, that takes the form of Brahmaputra. And while flowing from the Tibet, on this river only China has constructed hydroelectric projects. Clear? So China has entered into hard bargain. China cannot gain Tawang because it has constructed hydroelectric project. So in lieu of that, India can take Siachen Glacier. Now, what is the point of taking Siachen Glacier? It's totally a burden on our treasury. We are investing a lot, even when we are not earning anything from that. And we cannot earn, clear. That is the point that it has resulted into India's silence over this region also. Right? This is the reason, clear. And China, obviously, if you look into newspapers these days, what has happened to Taiwan, clear. China started to assert very strongly, clear. And the whole equation has been disturbed by none other than United States. Clear? It has altered the whole global equation. Clear? So now the attention shifted from Russia, Ukraine to China, Taiwan. Clear? The whole attention. US could not control Afghanistan also, could not control Ukraine also, and cannot rescue Taiwan also. Clear? The superpower image of US has totally been diminished. Clear? These are very important developments, and it was anticipated. Global community on POK. See, global community believes that, this also needs to be understood, global community believes that in order to decide the issue of POK, both India and Pakistan together should conduct a public referendum. Just understand, we are not against public referendum. We are not against plebiscite. We do consider. But referendum or plebiscite for whom? Referendum or plebiscite for Kashmiris, not for Pakistanis. we will conduct a referendum provided all Pakistani forces revert back to 1947 boundary. POK is for part of India, Kashmir. We will conduct referendum plebiscite, but once Pakistan reverts back to original boundary, because referendum will not be for Pakistan, referendum will be for people of Kashmir. We are ready for that. Clear? So global committee wants a referendum to be constructed. Jawaharlal Nehru made clear at that time also, United Nations. We are ready to conduct, provided Pakistani forces retreat back to the original boundary. Once it is done, we are ever ready to conduct referendum. Because referendum for whom? For the people concerned to that region, not to the people who have entered forcefully. So global committee wants a referendum. We are ready for referendum, but there is a condition for that, which is not acceptable to Pakistan. So standstill situation remains. This is the status. It's clear. So write briefly about Jammu and Kashmir also. Clear. We'll write about this. Recently, till Hyderabad we had written yesterday. Recently, Union Parliament made Article 370 inoperative, inoperative within inverted comma, made inoperative, that granted spatial status, to Jammu and Kashmir. Clear? Union Parliament in 2019, divided the region of Jammu and Kashmir, into two separate union territories. Right, point wise. Number one, Jammu and Kashmir, this is one part, Jammu and Kashmir, and second, Ladakh. Clear? This change has been introduced. Primarily to boost economic growth. By facilitating proper integration of this sensitive province. Facilitate proper economic growth by facilitating proper integration of this sensitive province with India's mainland. Integration of this sensitive province with India's mainland. Shall I repeat? Clear? This change has been introduced primarily to boost economic growth by integrating this sensitive province with India's mainland. It's clear? India's mainland. Even though it has altered the internal boundary of India, it cannot be taken as a proper reorganization of states. Because statehood has been replaced by centrally administered system. Still consequences are to be watched. Still for last 2 years, nothing much has happened in Jammu and Kashmir. Still the impact of this configuration needs to be seen. No major investments has been done till now and things remains to be standstill. But it has to be watched what major developments take place in future. Clear? Jammu and Kashmir, major one being Telangana that we had discussed yesterday. No. Apart from integration of princely states and reorganization of states, we'll discuss about one important development that took place in post-independent era on economic front. And on economic front, we'll discuss about, first of all, about land reforms. Then we'll discuss about economic planning. And third, agrarian unrest. Agrarian unrest is specifically mentioned in your syllabus for geography optional as well. Clear? So we'll discuss first of all land reforms in post-independent era. Just understand about this phenomena. Clear? As soon as India became an independent nation, the first major requirement for India was to go for proper land redistribution, because till that time land remained largely confined among the influential classes, the zamindars, the moneylenders and other business classes. Clear? So in order to promote equality in true sense, the first major requirement was to go for proper land redistribution through land reforms. Clear? Two methods were adopted for this largely. One was voluntary measures adopted, and these voluntary measures were adopted by the spiritual successor of Mahatma Gandhi, Acharya Vinoba Bhave. And at the same time, legal measures were adopted by Government of India through several Land Reforms Act placed under the 9th Schedule to Indian Constitution, incorporated through the first Constitutional Amendment Act in 1951. Originally, our constitution had only 8 schedules. Clear? 9th schedule was added primarily to ensure equality and land reforms, abolition of zamindari system. Will come to this Constitutional Amendment Act. First of all, voluntary measures. Clear? Since land distribution was highly discriminatory, confined among the moneylenders, the zamindari class and other intermediaries. Clear? A spiritual successor of Mahatma Gandhi, Acharya Vinoba Bhave, started a barefoot movement all across India, which is known popularly as Padyatra. Clear? And in this Padyatra, when he moved from place to place, he requested the landed aristocracy in India to surrender certain parts of the land voluntarily in favor of landless peasantry class in India. Clear? Since he went on requesting this to the landed aristocratic classes in India, in course of time, some major people began to donate certain parts of their land in favor of landless peasantry class. This resulted into a land gift movement in India. Gift means once it is given, cannot be taken back. So a land gift movement was started as a voluntary measure towards land reforms, which is popularly known in India as Bhudan movement. Bhu basically means bhumi or land. Dan basically means gift. So land gift movement or Bhudan movement was started in 1951. This movement was started originally from a Harijan dominated, Dalit dominated village known as the village of Puchampalli, located in the present district of Nalgonda in Telangana. Clear? Where a landed aristocrat named as Vedra Ramachandra Reddy donated certain part of his land in favor of landless peasantry class. This marked the beginning of Bhudan movement in India. In course of time, Acharya Vinoba Bhave further proceeded and he wanted that certain areas in a village should be donated by landed aristocracy, and this should be managed by cooperative of farmers, and therefore a village itself was to be created with gifted lands known as the Gramdan movement. Clear? This was started from 1952. The first village to be created as Gramdan village known as Magroth village, located in the present state of Uttar Pradesh. Clear? This development took place in 1952, but in course of time it was realized this movement could not be very productive in nature. Why it was not productive in nature? Because most of the landed aristocrat, they get granted infertile lands to the peasantry class. Obviously, it could not be distributed to the peasantry class. More so, it was also realized most of the lands which were gifted, they were already under litigation related to ownership. Obviously, it could not be continued by landed peasantry class. Just because of half-hearted gift of the landed aristocracy, neither Bhudan or Gramdan movement could be successful in India. Clear? But initiatives has been taken by Acharya Vinoba Bhave, who is also considered to be national teacher of India. Not S. Radhakrishnan. The national teacher of India is Acharya Vinoba Bhave. Clear? Very important personality. But legal and constitutional measures were also adopted by Government of India to ensure land reforms through several committees. The first major committee being Kumar Appa Committee after India's independence. We'll come to this committee. J.C. Kumar Appa. It's clear. You wanted to ask something. Okay, fine. Right heading as land reforms. Land reforms in post-independent era. Land reforms in post-independent era. Right, the most important challenge domestically, the most important challenge domestically was land reforms after India's independence, was land reforms after India's independence to promote the concept of welfare state. We are committed to that. To promote the concept of welfare state. Use these words, they are constitutional terms for India. Welfare state. Clear? Right. In order to ensure proper redistribution of land, in order to ensure proper redistribution of land, both voluntary and legal measures, both voluntary and legal measures were adopted by Indian leaders, Change paragraph, clear? Right, the spiritual successor of Mahatma Gandhi, Acharya Vinoba Bhave, started countrywide Padyatra, barefoot movement, countrywide Padyatra, and requested the landed class to surrender some part of their land, voluntarily to landless peasants. I hope you must be knowing about the difference between peasants and farmers. That difference is clear to all of you. Clear. So here we are talking about landless peasants. Clear. Land peasants. Clear. Right. Under his influence, a prominent landed aristocrat, Vedra Ramchandra Reddy, surrendered some part of land, in the village of Puchampalli, in Telangana. At the time it was Andhra, clear, in Telangana. Clear, right? This marked the beginning of land gift movement, land dash gift, beginning of land gift movement, popularly known as the Bhudan movement, known as the Bhudan movement. In 1951, clear? Change paragraph, right? Acharya Vinoba Bhave proceeded to create land gift village, whereby he wanted at least 75% of the landed class, 75% of the landed class, with 50% of total land holdings, with 51% of total land holdings, 51% total land holdings, to surrender a large village in favor of the peasantry class. Okay? Right. The first such village was created. At Magroth, Magroth, at Magroth in Uttar Pradesh. Hamirpur. There are two Hamirpur, one in Uttar Pradesh, another one in Himachal Pradesh. Clear? So Magroth in the district of Hamirpur, presently Uttar Pradesh. Magroth in Uttar Pradesh in 1952. In 1952. Clear? Right. This resulted into proper land surrender. Surrender in different parts of India. Clear? Right. However, it was realized that infertile lands were granted, and also land under litigation. Okay? Right. Consequently, Bhudan or Gramdan movements. Bhudan and Gramdan movements could not lead to desired result. Clear? For your information, I'll let you know. Acharya Vinoba Bhave in this task was also supported by a Gandhian and socialist leader. This person was Jayaprakash Narayan. Clear? And therefore, Jayaprakash Narayan shifted his focus towards fighting against political corruption. He started a movement from Bihar known as JP movement or Bihar movement, and later on came to Delhi even to demand resignation of Indira Gandhi. Clear? And just because it became highly popular, the JP movement, Indira Gandhi was forced to impose national emergency in 1975. Clear? No, he was not a part of Congress. He was an individual leader who started political agitation in Bihar. student leader, clear? Because when he started this, he started a political party known as Bihar Chhatra Sangharsh Samiti, clear? And the first president of Bihar Chhatra Sangharsh Samiti was none other than Lalu Prasad Yadav, clear? All of them emerged from there only. Nitish Kumar, Lalu Prasad Yadav, Mulayam Singh, all are product of emergency, clear? So all developments took place. So JP also came here, but he also directed his efforts towards political agitation in India that led to emergency. Now, at the same time, clear? Land reforms through constitutional and legal means. Indian government was also concerned with promotion of proper distribution of land, and Indian government after India's independence constituted an expert committee under J.C. Kumar Appa, and this committee gave its recommendations whereby the most important focus was on abolition of intermediaries, fixing of ceilings of land holdings, and at the same time enacting proper legislation for land reforms. When all such recommendations were given by Kumar Appa committee, thereafter Indian government decided to proceed in a very effective manner, and that was Indian government enacted the first Constitutional Amendment Act in 1951, whereby 9th schedule was introduced to Indian Constitution, and all laws related to equality, land reforms, abolition of zamindari system were to be placed under 9th schedule. Now, what was the need to have a separate schedule? Because at this time, Indian government realized that if any land reforms is introduced, thousands of litigation will be filed in the court of law, and he cannot proceed with this land reforms. Therefore, 9th schedule was given blanket immunity from judicial interference, meaning thereby all the laws which were to be incorporated in the 9th schedule, judiciary could not intervene and take up those issues just to proceed with land reforms effectively. This was a great move, and therefore several laws began to be enacted by Government of India to promote fixed ceilings of land and to abolish zamindari settlement. Clear? This started to take place and we proceeded effectively, but in course of time again there was a big challenge. The challenge was that at that time the most important thing was that all these laws were to be implemented by Indian bureaucracy. But the hard reality was that after few years of India's independence, at least, Indian bureaucracy was also highly elitist in nature. Most of them belonged to landed aristocratic classes. None of them showed eagerness to implement those land reforms effectively, because ultimately that could have gone against their own interest. That is why failure of bureaucracy, which was elitist in character, resulted into half-hearted implementation of land reforms in India. Clear? Moreover, 9th schedule itself began to be questionable in course of time. The reason was, in the beginning of 21st century, in the name of promoting equality, the state government of Tamil Nadu decided to provide reservation to OBCs more than 50%. In fact, up to the extent of 69%. And to give it immunity from judicial interference, this act was placed under 9th schedule to Indian Constitution. Clear? Supreme Court had to come to picture, because Supreme Court in its verdict already had made it clear in Indira Sahni case that more than 50% reservation cannot be granted. Clear? And therefore Supreme Court began to intervene even in the 9th schedule to Indian Constitution under the principle of the basic structure of Indian Constitution. Clear? The basic structure, even though is not defined, but it makes it clear that judicial review is a basic structure whereby judiciary can review any law in India. Judiciary began to intervene in the 9th schedule as well, and it was open for review of judiciary because of basic structure. But judiciary also made it clear that all the land related laws can be reviewed only if they've been incorporated in 9th schedule after 1973. Before 1973, those laws cannot be reviewed even by Supreme Court. Why? It couldn't be, but why? Question is, it could not be done. Why Supreme Court could not intervene into those cases that were incorporated into 9th schedule before 1973? The reason is that in 1973, a very important case came to before, known as Keshav Nanda Bharti case against state of Kerala, 1973, whereby it was made clear that the basic structure was introduced, and in this basic structure, judicial review was declared. So since it came only in 1973, the concept of basic structure, before 1973, the laws incorporated in the 9th schedule could not be reviewed even by Supreme Court. Clear? It couldn't be done just because of the verdict of Keshav Nanda Bharti came in 1973. Wafer thin margin. Clear? 13 judge bench was there. 7 judges went in favor. 6 judges went against. That was a big loss even for Indira Gandhi. That also became a major factor to impose emergency in India. And to reverse all these things, Indira Gandhi in the face of emergency went for comprehensive alteration of Indian Constitution through 42nd Amendment of Indian Constitution. These were major developments related to both polity and land reforms. First Constitutional Amendment Act. Clear? Right. Indian government. Right. Indian government took initiatives. Indian government took initiative towards land reforms. By constituting an expert committee under J.C. Kumarappa. Expert committee under J.C. Kumarappa. Very important writer also. He wrote a work which is very prominent, Gandhian Socialism. Clear? Socialism advocated under Gandhian philosophy. Great Gandhian activist also, Kumarappa. Like this committee recommended that role of intermediaries must be eliminated, comma, ceilings on land holdings must be fixed, and tenancy reforms should be introduced. And tenancy reforms, T-E-N-A-N-C-Y, reforms must be introduced. Okay. Right. In order to implement these recommendations, Government of India enacted the first Constitutional Amendment Act. The first Constitutional Amendment Act in 1951, whereby 9th schedule was incorporated in Indian Constitution. 9th schedule was incorporated in Indian Constitution. Clear? Right. All legislations related to zamindari abolition, and land reforms were to be placed in this schedule, which was to be given blanket immunity, from judicial interference. Clear? Right. Thereafter, several legislations began to be enacted. legislations began to be enacted, but these could not be implemented properly. These could not be implemented properly due to the elitist nature of Indian bureaucracy. At least for few years after India's independence. Clear? Indian bureaucracy. Clear? Right. Therefore, initiatives of government could not lead to proper land redistribution, Now, what has been the major impact? What has been the major impact of failure of land reforms in India? Tell me the most important impact. Tell me the most important impact of the failure of land reforms in India. Voluntary also failed. Constitutionally also it could not lead to desired result. Lands. Food insecurity. To some extent, but that was revived after Green Revolution of 1966. Tell me the most important consequence of the failure of land reforms in India. That is equally important for your GS. Family members. Yeah, that is there, but how India is concerned with that? That's a family matter. In every family, lands are distributed among the family members. Clear? The most important consequence of the failure of land reforms in India is the beginning of land fragmentation. Land fragmentation is, in fact, is still the most important problem. The most important problems of Indian agriculture are two. One is lack of land consolidation, that is fragmentation, and second, India is leveling of land. Land leveling has not been done, except in few states. Clear? Otherwise, in most of the productive alluvial soil region, that is corresponding with the states of eastern Uttar Pradesh and Bihar, land leveling has not been done. Land leveling done in Uttar Pradesh to some extent, in Punjab, Haryana, but not in states like Bihar and Jharkhand. Land leveling, Levelling. Land leveling has been a big challenge. Clear? If land leveling is not done, obviously some parts will remain inundated, some parts will remain scarce, or rather scarce of water resource. Land leveling is a big problem. Clear? Especially in the alluvial belt, that is the most important belt for agriculture, because it is not uniform. It slides down. Obviously, then land leveling becomes an issue. Clear? So land leveling, and second is land consolidation, fragmentation of land. Clear? The most important consequence of the failure of land reforms in India has been the beginning of class struggle in India known as Naxalism. Clear? It is a direct byproduct of failure of land reforms. Clear? Because peasants also waited for 2 decades, and finally, when land could not be redistributed properly among the landless peasantry class, 2 prominent thinkers named as Charu Majumdar and Kanu Sanyal, they gave ideology of conflict between the landless peasantry class and state itself. Clear? And that was given in Naxalbari village of West Bengal in 1967. That marked the beginning of Naxal movement in India, which still remains to be the greatest threat to India's internal security. Clear? The biggest outcome of the failure of land reforms is Naxal movement in India. Clear? And started from West Bengal exactly after 2 decades of India's independence in 1967. Clear? Very important development, and largely guided by Maoist philosophy, which is very radical, ultra radical philosophy, in which peasants are even asked to take up arms against the state. Clear? So it's a war against the state altogether, and the biggest problem to deal with this, that Naxalism is a headless enemy. We don't know the exact enemy, because these are only civilians of India. Clear? So obviously, when you take any action, it always becomes a matter of human rights violations. Clear? That is a major problem to deal with, Naxalism, but that is a direct outcome of the failure of land reforms in India. It failed because of the elitist nature of Indian bureaucracy, cannot be denied. Clear? Right? In fact, please.
Sir, the land reform and the 9th schedule was passed in 1951.
51.
and the Keshwanan Bharti case
1973.
73.
Huh.
So why did the Supreme Court wait for so longer time?
We Supreme Court sumoto cognizance. Supreme Court waited not only till 1973. Supreme Court waited till 21st century. Because the reason, again I'll let you know. Ultimately, who makes the law? The legislators. And what is the role of Supreme Court? To act as protector of the Constitution, guardian of the Constitution. Clear? Legislators made the 9th schedule to Indian Constitution and gave it a blanket immunity. So if it was given a blanket immunity, that means demarcation of the jurisdiction of Supreme Court was also fixed. Clear? Because obviously it was known, if it is not done, thousands of litigations will be filed and land reforms will never become a reality. So Jawaharlal Nehru himself made it clear it should be given a blanket immunity from judicial intervention. No, judiciary could not intervene. Why judiciary intervened? Judiciary intervened because of judicial review as basic structure of Indian Constitution. And when does it came? When did it came? It came in 1973 under Keshav Nanda Bharti case, because it was said that all major provisions of Constitution can be amended except some features which were declared to be basic structure. So since it came only in 1973, it was outside the purview of Supreme Court. Clear? Then also in 1973, Supreme Court did not interfere because it was realized that it was for the betterment of the society. But when some states began to take undue advantage of the 9th schedule, like grant of reservation up to 69%, then Supreme Court had to take sumoto cognizance. That was because it was the matter of protecting the basic features of Indian Constitution.
Voluntary by the Supreme Court, or is there something limitations or criteria?
It can be voluntary also. It can be, there can be some criteria, but normally it is voluntary. It depends on the wisdom of Supreme Court. Supreme Court can take any issue sumoto. Clear? It depends on the wisdom of the judges. Clear? So that is why he had to wait. Waited till 21st century, till this act was passed by state government of Tamil Nadu, DMK. Because maximum number of OBCs are there in southern part of India. In southern part of India, you have largely, the Varna system is not there. You must be knowing. Varna system is only there in the northern part of India. Clear? In southern part of India, that is why few Brahmins in historical times dominated the large number of Indian people, Dravidian people. They reacted strongly and that resulted into depressed class movement. So no depressed class movement in northern part of India. Don't think that movement of Mayavati and all these are depressed class movement. They are purely political agenda. Depressed class movements only in southern and western part of India. Only because there are only two broad social divisions strongly. So obviously Shudras in northern part of India realized they are not the only oppressed one. Kshatriyas and Vaishyas are also equally oppressed. So they had this point. But in southern part of India, direct oppression of the Shudras by few Brahmins obviously led to retaliation in form of depressed class. Starting with Jyotiba Phule in western part of India and then ending with the leaders like Dr. B.R. Ambedkar and in between leaders like E.V. Ramaswamy Naikar, Sri Narayan Guru. Only in southern part and western part, not in northern and central part of India. This is very important, and we don't call it lower caste movement, we call it depressed class movement. Clear? This terminology is disputed by members of scheduled caste. So only all major caste movements in southern part, especially Tamil Nadu. Tamil Nadu is the hotbed, clear, of all caste movements. DMK is originated from the social justice movement, Justice Party, clear, and Justice Party was the brainchild or rather party that promoted DMK and later on AIDMK. Tamil Nadu is the hotbed of that, clear? Not in northern, not in central part of India. There's a historical reason behind that. Caste structure is there, but not as divided, stratified as in northern part of India. Clear? There are only few Brahmins dominating the large number of the Dravidian people. Clear? So in between, as in North India, we have Kshatriyas, we have Vaishyas, they don't have those classes. That's the reason. So all humiliation or all disabilities imposed on Shudras, obviously it is quite obvious for them to retaliate. That retaliation took the form of depressed class movement. Not in northern central part. It's very important conceptual. Brahmins and non-Brahmins. That is why we call this movement as non-Brahmin movement also. Clear? And most of them have their own temples also. In Kerala, Malabar, if you go, Sri Narayan Guru, Sri Narayan Guru temples are there. SNDP temples are there. They have their own temples also because Brahmins prohibited them to enter into temples also. That resulted into temple entry movement in national movement during course of national movement. So all caste movement, the depressed class movement in southern and western part, not in northern and central part. This is a very conceptual thing. In prelims also this question is asked. Clear? 2 years back there was a question, Jyotiba Phule started depressed class movement in which part of India? The option was northern part, western part, southern part. They only wanted to know that whether you know that caste movement took place only in southern and western part of India. Not even Maharashtra. It was not Maharashtra also. Why western part? Because there's a belt, western and southern part. Because western and southern part is continuous belt. And there only all the Dravidian people migrated. Not in the eastern and central part. Huh? Yeah? So, no, western part. It started in western part and confined to southern part of India. Jyotiba Phule was the first one. Clear? Maharashtra region. Jyotiba Phule was from Malik community in Maharashtra, and then his legacy was carried forward by Sauji Maharaj. And all of them deviated from the teachings of Jyotiba Phule because all of them demanded reservation. Jyotiba Phule was the only person who demanded end of Varna system. Clear? None one of them could be as radical as Jyotiba Phule. Even Dr. B.R. Ambedkar was satisfied with only reservation. None of them demanded abolition of Varna system except Jyotiba Phule. That was the most radical one because he started or he wrote an article, a book known as Gulamgiri, whereby he wanted people to move away from the gulami, the slavery of the Brahmins. Clear? Very important development. These are conceptual things. Clear? So, land reforms failed just because of elitist character. We'll write about 9th schedule. Okay? Like, in fact, 9th schedule itself came under. 9th schedule itself came under the supervision of judicial experts in the beginning of the 21st century. In the beginning of the 21st century. Beginning of 21st century, due to misuse of this schedule by some states, especially Tamil Nadu, some states. Right? Therefore, Supreme Court declared that judicial review being the basic structure, of Indian Constitution, allows it to review the 9th schedule itself. 9th schedule itself. Like this has further affected the land reforms in contemporary times. This has further affected land reforms in contemporary times. And land distribution still remains to be. In favor of aristocratic classes. It still remains to be in favor of aristocratic classes. Clear? Major development, clear? Land reforms. Now, apart from this, clear? Under economy, we'll discuss about other dimensions in post-independent era like economic planning and agrarian interest. But just understand, clear? There's some questions from online students, clear? Challenge. Frontier is between two opposite party. Boundary can be anything. No, we had discussed specifically boundary and frontier. West Bank is a frontier. Sayyid Ahmed, yeah. West Bank can be accepted as frontier. Where is West Bank located? Israel and Jordan. Yeah, Israel and Jordan. Be prepared this area because in prelims you always get questions from this region. Map entries. Clear? Either Central Asia or West Asia. Clear? So Jordan, West Bank. Clear? Israel and Jordan. That is separated along or between we have got West Bank. That can be termed as frontier. Then at the same time, UN declaration, Naxalism. I hope you understand the concept of Naxalism, Chalish. Naxalism, you understand the concept. You understand about Maoism, Leninism. These are all important ideologies, clear. They have student wings also, ISA, SFI, clear. These are very important wings of ISA is being very radical, influenced by Maoism, SFI influenced by the Leninism, that is liberal form of communism. These are important ideology. They operate in campuses like JNU and all, clear. ISA is very radical, clear. SFI is quite liberal, but both supports communism. Liberal form of communism, radical form of communism. Maoism. ISA, All India Students Association. There are student wings that advocate Maoism, Leninism in India also. Is it clear? Anything to be asked? Because time, yeah, please. This is very valid. Why most of the frontiers has been replaced by boundaries? Anything? Anyone of with human civilization, especially in contemporary times. Why frontiers has been replaced by boundaries? Any one of you? First of all, content, we had discussed about the concept. Frontiers are basically a geographical concept that include large area, not a definite lateral line. Why frontiers has given way to boundaries? The reason is every country that wants to be a sovereign nation state with defined demarcated boundary, that country cannot rely on frontier. That country has to have a clear-cut delimited boundary. If it is frontier, it will always lead to infiltration across the frontier region. What is happening with Nepal? Clear? The problem with Nepal is we cannot stop the Madhesis. Madhesis are basically agriculture and pastoral community that lives in this frontier region, and they had been using this region for generations. So obviously for them, boundary will not make any sense. Clear? Since boundary will not make sense, obviously they are moving. But if we really want to have proper development in this region, we need to create a boundary. Clear? So in course of time, frontier will have to give way to boundary. So we have constructed that boundary because we cannot allow the free movement of people. So every country that wants to stop infiltration, wants to have its own political identity, the country will have to replace frontiers with lateral boundary. And that is why most of the regions frontier has been replaced. When human beings started, just understand, being a student geography, you will better understand. Clear? When land masses began to evolve, that is, land masses started, there were no boundaries, there were only frontiers, there were no countries as such in course of time. But in course of time, when land masses started, human beings started to evolve, human beings wanted to have their own area of operation. When they wanted own area of operation, they began to create man-made lines. This marked the beginning of boundaries. Clear? So initially, when they could not draw the boundary line, they began to follow the frontier. But as human beings civilized, a nation state came into being. Concept of nation state came into being. Nation state cannot come into being without defined boundary line. So wherever frontiers existed, we went for proper boundary line to maintain political identity and to give a right character to any nation state. So modern nation state all across the world is based on definite boundaries. So they cannot continue with frontiers. Large number of frontiers has been replaced. Only where frontier cannot be replaced because of any factor, then only we'll have to rely on that. For instance, clear? Take the case of India and Himalayan belt. In Himalaya, we cannot draw a boundary. That is not a feasible option. So obviously we'll have to follow the frontier. There's one thing. Suppose, for instance, coastal belt of India. Just understand, it's very important. Clear? In coastal belt of India, we cannot draw clear-cut boundary. The reason is there's a concept of territorial water and exclusive economic zone also. Clear? There also we define the boundary, but that cannot be a lateral boundary. It can anytime be extended also. It can anytime be reduced also with increase of water level. Clear? So obviously with all these things, frontier being a geographical phenomenon has submerged and political identity has emerged. Since political identity has become active and geographical frontier has become dormant, most of the frontiers has given way to boundaries. This is the major reason. Clear? Korean Peninsula, initially it was large peninsula, but just to give identity or based on ideology, South Korea being democratic country, North Korea being capitalist country, to give separate identity, they draw the lateral line. But where because of geographical phenomena, boundary cannot be drawn, frontiers still continue. But that is only in few cases. Large number of frontiers has given way to boundaries. If you understand the difference. In geographical manner, clear? Again, I'll let you know. In geographical manner, you will say that frontiers, first of all, you explain the geographical concept behind it. Clear? It's a pure geographical phenomena. That is, if a large landmass is marked by a few mountains in between. Clear? It is a pure frontier region. Two countries are there on the either side of the mountain. Is it possible to draw a perfect boundary line? Not a boundary line. So obviously that area has to be taken as the region of frontier. This is one thing, clear? Geographical phenomena. At the same time, if there is a large water body between the two regions, clear, that separates them, obviously, can you draw a boundary line? It's not possible. Obviously, you will follow the concept of median to divide the water also between the two countries, and that again will not be a boundary in real sense. So obviously it will be a frontier. There's one thing. If you want to answer in a clear-cut manner, I'll let you the biggest example. The most important example is African continent. Just understand, African continent was a large continent. When European powers established the imperial control of Africa, they started a concept in Africa known as scramble for Africa, which is also known as new imperialism. And when scramble for Africa started, Britain, France, Dutch, they started to parcel out African territory, clear? And when they began to parcel out, they began to draw man-made line in Africa. That is why, if you look into northern part of Africa, known as sub-Saharan, their all lines are straight. These straight boundaries indicate man-made lateral lines, because if there was no geographical boundary or geographical hindrance, they went for straight lines. Wherever there was certain topography, obviously they had to take consideration of that topography. So Africa is the biggest example of boundaries, clear? That's very important to understand. If you look into African continent, boundaries are not natural boundaries. Clear-cut scaling lines has been done, and that was done by European powers. So if you want to answer from geographical perspective, explain the phenomena of frontier. Frontier can be Himalayas, hills, frontier can be large water bodies. Can you divide that? It is not possible to divide. Obviously, then you will have to follow the concept of frontier. But if it is a mainland area, large mainland area, and different states, nation state has to merge, there should be proper demarcated boundary. That will lead to proper countries. African continent, Central Asia. If you look at that, clear. Why Russia cannot be demarcated? Russia is marked by a large region of Siberia, and Siberia is inhospitable belt. Can you draw a boundary line there? You cannot draw that. I'll let you know another example. There are many examples like that. Clear? If you go to the region of Alaska, that is the international date line, till Alaska, America has control, but there are large number of islands there. Those islands cannot be segregated or bifurcated because of geographical phenomena. So whatever countries has their control, they continue to have the control. Like in Atlantic Ocean, Britain has the oldest colony in form of Bermuda Triangle. Who will go there to demarcate the boundary? Clear? Britain has control over St. Helena, where Napoleon died. Anyone will go to draw a boundary line? Because these are all isolated islands in the country. It cannot be done. Like the Capes of Australia is a large continent relatively, but look into the boundaries of Australia. There's straight line, Queensland and other areas. Clear? Why? Because it is a plain region that can easily be done. If that could have been a hilly region, coastal belt, it could not have been done. So you have to explain it with examples. Clear? So take the examples, most importantly, of the areas marked by hilly tracts, areas marked by large water bodies. Their boundary cannot be there. But take the example of Africa. It's the biggest example of man-made natural boundaries, normal boundaries. It can easily be drawn. Imperial power drew that line. Clear? If you look into South Africa, there are large number of smaller countries like South Africa, Namibia, Lesotho, Botswana. They are very small countries and bifurcated. Why they were bifurcated? Because of diamond mines. You must be knowing. Africa got a diamond mines there, and since diamond mines were, British defeated the Dutch in the Boers War, and they established control and they demarcated according to diamond mines. Man-made lines. Examples. Geographical. Political examples. Man-made. That's why we explain here that boundary is a pure political concept, frontier is a pure geographical concept. So geographical concept giving way to political identities. It's clear. So we'll continue in the next session. We'll start with economic planning and then agrarian unrest. This is a direct topic, I suppose, in political geography. Agrarian unrest in post-independent era or in India. We'll discuss that agrarian unrest, reasons for that. Clear. Thank you.